Okay, good morning. This is Kiddushin 23, Kaf Gimel, and we will begin towards the top of Kaf Gimel on Aleph 23a. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 lines down. The Tonas Asma Bekesa. This is for Tuesday, September 5th. So first, let's look back at the Mishnah briefly on the previous Amud, 22b. Every Kanani nikla b'kesef b'shar b'chazaka. There are three ways that a Kanani slave can be acquired: through money, through a document, or through chazaka, some kind of action that affects a transfer of ownership. B'konas atzma b'kesef al yidei acherim. How does he become freed? How does he reacquire himself? With money through others. B'shar al yidei atzma, and with a deed, with a contract, document through himself. The Gemara will explain in more detail. That's what Rav Meir says. That's the first thing we'll discuss today. The rabbis say bekesef, with money through himself. And then this next phrase appears to be part of the rabbis, but the Gemara will, as we'll see, will split it up. And with a document through others. And again, we'll see what through himself and through others means exactly. But the money has to be through, has to come from other people. Okay, so let's go to 23a. So Rabbi Meir had said the kesef l'idei acherim in avalo l'idei atzmo. So Rabbi Meir says with money through others. So that implies not through his own money. So what are we talking about exactly? We're talking about where this is without the slave's participation or knowledge. In other words, someone is a slave, and other people are dealing with his fate. Let's see. Rabbi Meir says, we've seen that Rabbi Meir says that is it good or bad for a person to be a slave? So for this Evet Kanani, Rabbi Meir says it's better to be a slave, and it's bad to leave slavery, to leave his master, because as we've seen before, we saw actually in Gittin that if the slave is owned by a Kohen, then he can't eat truma anymore. And even if he's of a regular person, not a Kohen, then he loses the ability, the right to live with a Shikha Kananis, a slave like himself. If he's a full-fledged, if he becomes free, he becomes fully Jewish. But the Tanina, on the other hand, we know, when it comes to giving someone a benefit, you can give a benefit. You can go deposit money in somebody's account because that can only be to their benefit. He doesn't have to consent. But you can't withdraw from his account. You can't give him something negative without his consent. So it has to be that the slave must be participating here, because if freedom is a negative thing for the Zavet Kanani, then he has to be involved, at least in the sense that somebody else can do it, but he has to be consenting. So what Rabbi Meir says is, so yes, he can be redeemed through someone else if he gives his consent, somebody else paying for his freedom. But he can't redeem himself with money. And why would that be? Because he doesn't have any ownership. Anything that he acquires belongs to his master. Alma ein kinyan lebed below rabo. So like the only possible understanding of why the slave can't come up with his own money to free himself is that he can't acquire money at all, because he's an eved. But if that's the case, let's look at the end of what Rabbi Meir says. With the document, he can become free through his own, on his own, or through his own means. This implies, as a mirror of what we had before. He can accept the document of emancipation on his own, but not somebody else. Not somebody else cannot do it for it. Now, if we're talking about where the slave consents to this process, but somebody else accepted on his behalf. Why is there a difference between money and document? And uh, maybe you'll say, no, we shouldn't imply that from through his own means, through his own hands, that the shtar is through his own means, but not through someone else's. Maybe it means even through his own hands. In other words, to include somebody else. No, you can't say that. Oh, and it might be that if we say that, it would be that telling us that, just like we say with a woman's divorce, she's in the same situation after all. Everything she acquires belongs to her husband in general. So how can she accept the get? The get still belongs to the husband. So we say Gito kacha, that it's a simultaneous thing. We allow this because her independence and the get arrive simultaneously. Um, so maybe the same thing applies to the slave. And when Reb Meir says he can that others can accept the shtar, the document for him, it means, and he can too as well. But no, that's not the case. The Tanya, we have a brisa, the shtar al atzmo v'lo al acherim do Reb Meir. We have a brisa which repeats our Mishnah but elaborates and says that no, the shtar can only be through himself and not through others, according to Rabbi Meir. So why not? Why can't others redeem the slave with a document by accepting a document of emancipation? Amar Bai, the Olam Shlomi Data. Okay, so we're not talking about with the slave's consent. We're actually talking about without the slave's consent. So he's completely passive. He may even be unaware of what's going on. Other people are acting on his behalf. The Shani Kesef. So why is there a difference between money, redeeming them through money, and redeeming them through a shtar? That one can be done with his one second. Shani Kesef, but yeah, money is different and can be done even without his consent. In other words, we're talking about in general where it's without his consent. But with money, with money, it can be without his consent. Since he can be bought against his will, presumably a person does not want to be sold into slavery. And if he can be bought against his will, so he can be redeemed against his will. But you can't acquire. But so the acquisition might be different. Whereas it's not different. You can acquire a slave through a shtar as well. So why would there be a difference, whether it's with his consent or not his consent when it comes to his freedom? Answer: no, it's a different kind of document, right? The selling him into slavery is a business transaction. This is a personal status matter, so you can't compare the two. So where says high cost food by high cost food. So you should say the same thing about money, right? In one case, the money is being used to affect a business transaction to acquire him, and in the other case, it's to just change his personal status. So my answer is Tiva Mia Hakatu. No, money is money, right? And money, like, you use the same coin for different purposes. It's money is money. You can say that money works the same way, but the shtar, you have a different shtar. You have a different document. You have one type of document. The document has different words in it, right? It's not. You have to use a different form. Therefore, you would distinguish for a shtar between acquiring and freeing. Rav Amar. Rava makes a different distinction between kesef and shtar. Kesef, kabbalas rabo garmo. How does money work when it comes to acquiring it? When it comes to redeeming him, it's when the master receives the money. Shtar kabbalas acherim garmo. But the emancipation document goes the other way. The master gives it, doesn't receive it. He gives it to the other people. So they so you could say they can't receive it without his consent. But in the case of the of money, the master is receiving it. So when you need any consent on behalf of the slave, he doesn't acquire the money in that situation. Okay, now we're going to look at the Chachamim. So in the Mishnah, so Chachamim are in Bekesel Day Atzmo. We started with and the Gemara now assumes that the Chachamim made both these statements: money through his own through his own money, and shtar through someone else on his behalf. So that implies that if the Chachamim are saying specifically money is with his own money, that means other people's money can't do it, can't free him. Amai, why is that? Even if it's without the slave's consent, the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Meir, and they say that it's better to be free, right? So why shouldn't others be able to free him with money? Because it's a benefit for him. He doesn't need to give his consent. And we learn in the Mishnah that you can give a person a benefit without his knowledge or consent. And we're examining this in the same way we did Reb Meir. Maybe you want to say that he money through his own money, and meaning even through his own money, and certainly with other people's money. The commercial and that what's it telling us that that a slave can acquire something without his master, right? And that's how he can acquire his own. He can accept his own freedom. What about the end when the Chachamim say with a document can be through others but not himself? Why not himself? Why can't he accept the star himself? It should be just like a woman's get, right? That sure, he has no way to accept something, but the emancipation document itself, we would say that he gets his rights to acquire something simultaneously with his freedom. So he can accept the emancipation document. So it can't be that they mean only through others. He should be able to, if that's the case, he should be able to accept his own emancipation document. So why would the rabbis say no? Maybe it means even through others. And it would tell us that it's a zuchus, that it is a benefit to him to go free. So that's so both sides of what the Chachamim are saying means that he can be freed through either money or a star, either through himself or through others. So, say it together. Like, why do you have two separate statements? This should be a distinction. So what we're understanding the mission now as follows. Okay, so money, the Chachamim mean it can be through his own money or through other people's money. But with the document, only through others and not himself. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who is the author of this last statement, the last phrase here? That's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. So that is a third opinion the Mishnah is being parsed into three separate opinions, and this Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the new statement, or how we're reading the last phrase of the Mishnah. And where do we see this evidence? In Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Af b'shar al yidei acherim v'lo al yidei atzmo. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says specifically with the star, also with the star, only through others, accepting the document, but not himself. So that is the third phrase in the Mishnah. And so there's three disputants in the Mishnah, not two. So that's how we can make it come out right. Amar Rabba. My time to Rosh Hashanah, what's Rosh Hashanah's reasoning that he can't receive his document on his own? Amar La La Meisha. It should be similar to a woman's get, because it uses the word law in both cases. Ma'isha Ashiyosu get l'rshus she'eno shalom af avadname Ashiyosu get l'rshus she'eno shalom. Just as a woman, like if it has to be the woman's domain that she receives her get, so it could be her own hand or some property that she owns independent of her husband. So which is possible for a woman, right? She can bring in property into the marriage that still belongs to her and is not ceded entirely ownership-wise to the husband. So for an Eved, we have to have the same thing. It has to be, his document has to be given in a place in such a way that it's not in the master's domain anymore. And the Eved has no such thing. There's no exemption. There's no property exemption to the Eved. You can't become an Eved Kanani and say, well, I'm bringing in this property into the relationship and it's still mine. No, it doesn't work that way. So um, that's why he can't receive his own star, his own emancipation document, but a woman can. Boy, Rabba asks, Eved Kanani Moshe Yasa Shaliach L'Kabel Gito Miyavra. Can an Eved Kanani make an agent to receive his shichur, his emancipation document from his master? Now, do we Kevan the Gomer Lolam Isha, since we're comparing him to a woman? Now we know Keisha that he should be like a woman, and we know that a woman can appoint an agent to receive her get for her. So the evidence should be the same because we're saying that they're in the same boat. Dilmar, maybe Isha the Mati Mekabelas Gito Shliach Nomi Mati Mishaviyalim. No, maybe we should say that a woman who can accept her own get can appoint an agent to do it. But an Eved who can't even accept his own get, it makes no sense for him to appoint an agent to do something that he can't do himself. Eved Yolam Mekabelas Gite, Eved, a slave who cannot accept his own emancipation document, Shliach Nami Mati Mishmasha, can't make an agent for it. After he asked the question, he answered his own question. We're going to say it's the same as a woman, Keisha, just like a woman can appoint an agent to accept her get for her. A slave, even though he can't do it for himself, because the comparison to a woman doesn't apply in the sense that he doesn't have his own agency, his own agency in this case, he doesn't have his own way to acquire anything. He doesn't have any ownership ability. But when it comes to appointing an agent, he can do that just like a woman can. What about what Rav Huna said? When the Kohanim, going to a different area now in terms of shlichus, in terms of agency, when the Kohanim do the temple service, the sacrifices and so on, they are God's agents, not our agents. They're doing this as the appointed agents of God. The and you might want to say, no, they're doing our work. Like these are our sacrifices. It's the kahal, the tzibur, the community bringing sacrifices, and we're the ones charged with doing it, and we appoint the kohanim to do it, or we're told to appoint the kohanim to do it. But if you think that, how can you think of another example of something that you can't do yourself, but you can appoint someone else to do, right? So that's why we think they're God's agents. But wait a minute. What about this Eved? Here's a case, according to Rabbah, of an Eved who cannot accept his own shichur, his own document of emancipation, but he can appoint an agent. So the Jewish people should also, even though the regular people cannot do sacrifices in the temple, they can appoint kohanim to do it for them. So the Gemara says, like, what about our case? What about an Eved? He can't accept his own get, but he can make an agent. But you can't make that comparison. Nobody ever told a Yisrael, a non-Kohen, that he can bring a sacrifice. He can do the sacrificial work, service in the temple, right? It has nothing to do with him. The Torah says the Kohen has to do all this, right? We're never told that this is the regular Israelite person's thing to do, and so that he could appoint a Kohen to do it. It's not like there's no basis to say that this is the work of the ordinary non-Kohen person. But Eved Shaykh Begid, but a slave has a connection of to getting these documents of emancipation. The Tanya, we have a brisa. It seems right to say that a slave can accept a emancipation document of another slave from another person, from another master, right? But not from his own master. So let's say you have A owns B and C owns D. So D can accept B's emancipation document from A. He's a completely third party. He could be acting on behalf of his master, let's say. So he's a third party in regards to A and B. Um, so there is, so any Eved, even though he can't accept his own emancipation document, he is part of the process. He can be part of the process. Let's say, if somebody else's emancipation document, and um, therefore, it is not comparable to the case um, of uh, a regular person bringing a carbon. In that case, we would say the regular person has nothing to do with karbanos. He's not instructed to have anything to do with karbanos. The Kohen is instructed. The Kohen is instructed by God, and he's not an agent of someone who has, in a sense, nothing to do with it. It's a little odd because we generally assume that the sacrifices are being brought on behalf of Jewish people, right, of the whole kahal. But any individual, is not really part of that process unless he's a kohen. Okay. So now the last thing in the Mishnah was the money has to come from others. The name of Hakavich, maybe this is what's the root of the dispute between the mayor and the rabbi. Rav Meir Savar and Kinyan Levi below Rabbi. Rav Meir says you cannot have an acquisition. A slave cannot acquire anything without his master. In other words, anything he acquires automatically, he's acquiring it on behalf of his master. Below Bala. Similarly, a woman can't acquire something that doesn't belong to her husband. When she acquires it, it's really her husband who she's acquiring it for. The rabbis say no. There can be a case where a slave can acquire something. And there can be a case where a woman acquires something independently. And we'll see. I think, the details of this in a minute. Or was that from yesterday? But the idea is that there could be a condition, maybe according to the Chachamim, there could be a condition that I'm giving this to you, Mr. Eved or Mrs. So-and-so, on the condition that it is yours and not your husband's or not your master's. But Rabba disputes this explanation. No, nobody says that. Everybody says you can't acquire, Eved can't acquire anything, a wife can't acquire anything. Somebody else gives the slave or the woman $100. And he makes this condition that this is for you only and not for your master. So how do we parse this? So Meir says, okay, he says, I'm giving this $100 to you. That works, right? The ownership is transferred to who? The master, right? And then when he makes the condition, when he makes the condition, a condition that's yours, not the master's, it's a nonsense condition, right? So we say that the gift takes effect without the condition, so it goes to the master. But the rabbis say no. The condition is good, so that's why they say that if that with his own money, if someone gives him the money and says this is for your emancipation alone, then that works. Rabbi Lazar understands it differently. Everybody agrees that there's that we ignore the condition, right? Before we just wanted to say that the rabbis disagree with that. Rabbi Lazar says no. Everybody understands that the condition is nonsense because everything the slave acquires belongs to the master. That's clear. What are we talking about? Someone else gave the slave $100. Giving this to you with the condition that this is the price of your freedom. So I'm giving it to you. Mr. Slave. Yes, it's acquired by your master, but it's acquired on condition that this is your emancipation. Like this is buying you out of slavery. Rabbi Meir Silver Kamerle Rabbi Meir says that when he says here's $100, Kani Evid Kani Rabbi, so the master acquires it. But the condition is like if you're giving something to somebody and then you say, but you have to spend it on this, or it has to be for your slave's freedom, we ignore that, right? Rabban several diname holokamaknile. But the rabbis say that even that that it doesn't that the gift doesn't take effect. The he's only saying to the slave on condition that you go free. So since there's strings attached to the gift, so we say that it doesn't take effect, that the gift doesn't take effect, and the freedom doesn't take effect, and that's the source of the dispute between the rabbis and Rabbi Meir. And we'll stop here for today. David will pick it up on Wednesday.